Once upon a time... Oh, by the way, this story is going to be called The Jet Fighter. The Jet Fighter. Once upon a time, there was a man called Biggles who lived a long, long time ago during the Second World War. Biggles was a pilot. He flew jet fighter planes. One day, Biggles was at the airport and it was time to take his jet fighter out for a surveillance mission. Surveillance means you look what's underneath on the ground and take pictures. So he was flying his plane over some fields in the countryside when he noticed something a little bit unusual. It appeared to be the tracks of plane wheels going from through the middle of a field and into the bushes, but he couldn't see any plane, so he flew his plane over the top, then turned it round, came back and had another look, flew it a second time, but again all he could see were the tracks of the tires of a plane, but no plane. So he radioed back to headquarters. Hello, headquarters. I'm doing my surveillance mission, and I'm flying over a field in the south of England, and I can see some plane tracks in the field, but I can't see the plane. It seems to have vanished. Very good, Biggles. Take some photographs and come back to base, and we'll have a look at them. So Biggles took his camera and started to take photographs of the plane tracks in the field, as if two wheels had gone there, and went back to base. And then they developed the photos and looked at the pictures very carefully. And indeed, there was no plane to be seen. But they said, yeah, these are definitely plane wheels. Look, they're the same distance apart as a German Messerschmitt plane. Can you get into bed, please? Oh, stop. So they decided to investigate a bit more. So this time, Biggles went with one of his friends, who was another pilot called Ada. Ada was the other pilot's name. So Biggles and Ada both flew their jet planes in the direction of the field where they'd seen the wheels. And when they got there, they both flew around several times looking for the missing plane, but they couldn't see it anywhere. Finally, they decided they'd better land, and they both landed in the field, making more wheels, and then they got out of their planes and started to follow the tracks into the bushes. When they finally got into the bushes, they noticed that there was a German Messerschmitt plane hidden there and covered with branches so you wouldn't be able to see it from the sky. Well, said Biggles, looks like the Germans have landed in England. What could be going on? And they looked around for the pilot, but there was no pilot to be seen anywhere.
Maybe he was not careful and the wheel came off and then he landed in a bush. Then the pilot get out and then got out with the shame.
Well, that was for sure. The pilot had got out of the plane and had walked off somewhere. Biggles said, I think he might be a spy.
What's a spy?
A spy is someone who spies what people are doing and reports back to headquarters, in this case in Germany. We don't want any spies in England, do we? He said.
What's a spy? Why we don't want spies in England?
Because they didn't want the Germans to know what they were doing, any more than the Germans didn't want the English to know what they were doing. So Biggles and Ada decided to set off to look for the spy. They looked everywhere, but they couldn't see him.
To use the jet fighters.
Well, said Biggles, he's on foot. He couldn't have got far.
They used the jet fighters.
So
they used the jet fighters.
They were on foot now. So they started to think, where could the spy have gone? And then they spotted a footpath in the wood. Maybe he went down this footpath. So they started to follow the footpath through the woods. Then suddenly Ada spotted something in the bushes near to the path. It was a German pilot's cap. Look, he said, a German pilot's airplane, jet fighter's cap. He must have gone this way. He can't be far. So they kept walking until they came to a little clearing in the wood. And in the clearing, there was a small fire, and sitting next to the fire was a man.
And he was
Shh, said Biggles. This could be our spy. Yes, said Ada. We must capture him and take him back to headquarters.
to the prison.
Yes. So they crept up, and then Biggles pulled out his gun, pointed at the man and said, "Hey you, stand up." The man looked very startled, and as this happened, he saw Biggles and Ada, and the man jumped up and said, "Heil Hitler!" which is what they used to say in the Second World War if they were Germans. And then Biggles said, "Surrender at once. You are captive." But the man said, "Nein, I will not be caught." And he jumped down and started running as fast as he could into the bushes. Biggles pulled out his gun and started shooting, but he missed. So the man was running away, and Biggles and Ada started running after him. But he was tearing through the bushes like at breakneck speed. It was very hard to keep up with him. They seemed to go in a very large circle when they suddenly came out of the field where they landed their planes. Now, the German, the spy, jumped in his plane and started the motor. Biggles and Ada were running to catch him, but the plane started to take off just before they could capture him. So they ran to their planes.
Then they had jet fighters.
They ran to their jet fighters, started the engines, and then they took off too and started to chase the German Messerschmitt plane in the air. The Messerschmitt plane was very fast, but Biggles' plane and Ada's plane, jet fighters, were also very fast. "Okay," said Biggles, "I'm going to try and shoot him with my missiles at the bottom of my jet fighter." So Biggles lined his plane up, got the German plane in his eyesight, and pulled the trigger. But just as he pulled the trigger, the Messerschmitt took a dive, and the missile from Biggles' plane went rushing by, missing the jet fighter by a few inches and disappearing, and the missile disappeared into the distance. Biggles had a few more attempts at shooting the German airplane, but he had no success in the end. Then they continued to chase the German Messerschmitt until it suddenly went. It was running out of fuel.
What?
It was running out of fuel.
What was running out of fuel?
The German Messerschmitt, the plane flown by the German spy. And as it happened, the propellers stopped turning, and the jet stopped coming out of the back, and the plane started to descend. Descend means go down. So Biggles and Ada followed the descending German plane carefully until they saw it land, and Biggles and Ada's plane landed very, very close by.
Shoot it.
And the German started running. But this time, Ada and Biggles were fast enough to capture him, and they jumped on him and held him down and tied his hands behind his back. "Now you're our captive," they said. "Please, please," said the German. "Don't hurt me." But Biggles said, "Sorry, we're going to have to take you back to headquarters to interrogate you." They took him back to the headquarters in their plane and sat him down and said, "Now, why have you come to England? Please, please, I am not a spy," said the German. I like England. I am not your enemy." "Don't be silly," said Biggles. "We know Germany is the enemy, and this is the Second World War, and we're at war with Germany." "No, I am not an enemy. I am a friend. I'm Freund." said the German. Biggles and Ada looked at him carefully. They thought maybe he's telling the truth. Yes, I do not like Hitler. I do not like what is going on in Germany, he said. I want to come to England to escape. I want to be free. I will fight against the Germans, my own countrymen. So, Biggles and Ada weren't sure if he was telling the truth. Just then the German had an idea. He reached his wallet and pulled out some photographs. It was of the German that they had, plus a lady and 2 little children. Who's that? Said Ada. Ah, that is mein Frau, my wife, said the German. And who are the 2 children? Ah, they are my children, said the German. Where are they? Said Biggles. Well, they are back in Germany. I could not bring them with me. But I do hope that when this war is over, I can bring them to England to live peacefully with thee, said the German. Well, after a while, Biggles and Ada started to believe the German. All right, they said, we believe you. You can stay, but you must do some work every day to show you that you are helping Britain. So they gave him work to feed the chickens, look after the pigs, and feed the cows and milk the cows, and those sorts of things on the farm, which was next to the airfield, where Biggles worked. Now, going on from the story, the man worked very hard. It was very good. And and while this was happening, Biggles and Ada went on many missions to fight the German planes in the air. And with their missiles, they would shoot them down and then fly back to base to get more missiles and then fly up in the air over the English Channel. That's the water between England and France, where the Germans were flying. And then have lots of dogfights where they go with their missiles shooting at each other. And sometimes Biggles or Ada would hit another plane, the German planes that is, and make them crash into the sea. Luckily for Biggles and Ada, they only got slightly hit. There were a few bullet holes in their wings, but no bullet holes in the main fuselage, and nothing smashed the window. So they managed to get through the war until the war was finished. And the war was finally finished and the German was still working there at the military base cabinet. So, the war was finished and the German, they got to know his name was Hans-Peter. Hans-Peter. They asked Hans-Peter, what are you going to do now? Are you going to go back to Germany or are you going to stay here? I would like to stay here and I want to bring my wife and children to England. England is so lovely. I like the English and I'm speaking better and better English now. Well, Biggles and Ada looked at each other and smiled because actually his English wasn't that good. But sure enough, as time passed, the man's wife and children came from Germany to live with him in England at the military base. One day the time came for the German to settle down in England, so he said goodbye to all his friends and to Biggles and to Ada at the military base, shook all their hands, and off he went with his wife and his 2 children.
Where?
Somewhere in England to build his own house and to work. And that, my little boy, is the end of the story. Have you got any questions?
Should you do the same story again?
I can let you listen to it on this machine. Okay?
No.
I don't have a lot of tolerance for telling the same story twice. I don't really apart from the fact I never remember a story, I don't think I could tell it to you twice, even if I wanted to.
I thought you were my friend.
Okay, you say what you want to do, say for 1 minute.
Zaka. Mommy.
stop that.
No.
Right. These are silly sounds. Let's stop. Do it again in a minute.